Today we'll be making the one-pan creamy turkey tetrazzini with spaghetti and mushrooms. Let's start with preparing the ingredients and starting with the pasta. What I like about this recipe is that it only requires one cookware, which is a huge pot, but this is the largest pot that I got. So once water is boiling, add the pasta and make sure they all folded into the pot. If you have a larger pot, you may not have this problem. If you're like me, only using a medium-sized pot, then you have to stand there and make sure that the pasta goes in once they're softer. Let it boil for 10 minutes. I use chopsticks to push the pasta in, but obviously you can use anything that can push the pasta in. Remember, we need to reserve the pasta cooking water, so just be mindful of that. Then we start with preparing the vegetables. It's really simple on this recipe. All you need is mushroom and green onions. So starting with the green onions, chop them on an angle preferably, and then keeping the white and the green portion separate. One thing to note here is that I wish I knew I needed more green onions, because at the end when I was garnishing the dish with the green portion of the green onions, I wish I had more. So just keep that in mind. You probably need a little more green onions, and if you really love green onions, do a little more than 2 bunches. Then we start preparing for the mushrooms. Basically slice them into 1/4 inch slices, and any mushroom will work here. The mushrooms we have are less fresh than we want them to be because they have been sitting in the fridge for several days, so keep that in mind. It's really hard to keep the mushrooms fresh because they have a little moisture that are always attracting, and by the way, they also have moisture when you bought them, so keep that in mind. Keep them dry and fresh. So I'm preparing all these ingredients while the pasta cooks. It's more of a nice multitasking, so then you don't have to wait for the pasta. And I show you how we move on to the next step, which is cooking the turkey while the pasta is still being cooked. So while the smaller pot is boiling the pasta, I found a much bigger pot so we can use it for combining the turkey and the pastas later, which is nice. So put in some olive oil, 2 tablespoons, 2 teaspoons, your preference, and then we add in the ground turkey. Make sure you break up the meat. It's important to see the color and make sure that there's no pink remains for about 6 to 8 minutes of cooking time. And then make sure that we put in the some salt, some pepper, and also the white portion of the green onions as well. This is the salt that I recommend you get. It packs so many health benefits, you can look it up. Now we're adding in the white portion of the green onions and stir until there's no pink. And in this case, I cover it and let it sit for a few minutes. Because I have the heat on low, I can afford to just let it sit, but if you have medium to high heat still on, make sure you set the timer to 6 minutes or 8 minutes. The most important measure again is to see no pink in the meat. If you flip them, stir them, and see no pink, then you're fine. Guys, this is the multitasking I'm talking about because this really saves your cooking time. So while we're waiting on the meat, we can drain the pasta in a colander like I'm doing here, and we're setting that aside. Make sure that you reserve the pasta cooking water. We're going to need that out on the second stage of cooking the meat. Now moving back to the second stage of cooking the meat. So we keep stirring it until there's no pink, and we're adding in the mushrooms and some garlic pepper, and stir occasionally until the mushrooms are tender for about 5 to 8 minutes. You can use a timer, or you can just have a feeling on the tenderness of the mushrooms if you're really good at it. Then we'll need to add in the flour and stir until no dry flour remains. Basically, this coats the meat with the flour, and that makes the flavor easier to be attached to the meat. So once we see no dry flour remains in the pot, we will add in the pasta cooking water. Keep stirring it. It's going to get a lot moist, and we need to use that moist to basically add in the cream cheese, so it gets the cream cheese softer a lot faster, because when the cream cheese is dry, it's really hard to break down and it's really hard to become a part of the flavor. Remember to keep stirring on it, and then we're getting ready to add in 1.5 cups of water. So add in 1 cup first and then another half cup. Stir everything to combine. Make sure that you also add in the chicken broth concentrate and also the Portobello sauce as I'm showing here. Once you stir and everything's combined, now you feel free to add some more pepper, and you can also add some more salt if that is your flavor, but make sure you don't add any more than 1 teaspoon of salt. And set a timer for 5 minutes. I think that keeps you on track to make sure that you're not boiling this for too long. Once the pot starts simmering, stir occasionally until they're kind of thick enough to coat the back of the spoon. As you can see here, I opt to add in the pasta a little earlier because I don't want the sauce to get too thick. If that is not your thing, then feel free to wait a little longer before adding in the pasta. I made this mistake for letting the pasta sitting in too long in the blender, and they're basically very sticky, but that is okay. So once I got them all into the pot, they're easy to combine with the sauce. Keep stirring until you see the pasta coated by all the sauce and they seem to be heated through. Probably just 1 to 2 minutes would actually do. So you basically judge this by the tenderness of the pasta and also the color of the sauce and also the amount of the sauce, because you burn it too long, the sauce is going to diminish. So finally, we're getting ready to plate the dish. Divide the pasta into the right portion for however many people that you're trying to serve this to. And then finally, before giving to them, garnish with the green portion of the onion and the Parmesan. Bon appetit! See, my wife can't wait to take the dish from me. You can see the final product actually looks very nice because I don't have a whole lot of the white sauce, because personally I think the white color actually impacts the freshness looking of the dish, but just my personal preference. Recipe courtesy of Home Chef. This is 1 pan creamy turkey tetrazzini. It took us about 30 to 40 minutes from start to finish. I think it's a rather easy recipe.